So next we're going to take a look at what we're doing when we click on this button to take the user to the member detailed page. And let's go back to VS Code and take a look at this. So we've already got our method in our service to go and get the member. And let's take a look at what we're doing inside our routes, because I believe when we configured this, we used the members ID route. We're actually going to use the username for this and not the ID. So I'm going to change the placeholder there for a dynamic route from ID to username. And then let's head over to our member detail component. So I'm just going to close all of this stuff down to tidy things up. And I'm going to open up the member detail component.ts. And inside here, we're going to need access to a few things. So we're going to need access to the member service. So I'm going to say private member service equals, and we're going to inject the member service, and not this member service. We need to get the one coming from services member service. And we're also going to need something from the router, because what we need access to is the username that's going to form part of the route parameter. And we're going to need access to routes. I'm going to call it routes, and we're going to inject the activated route. So when a user comes to our member detail page, they're effectively activating a route, and we want to get something from that activated route. And we're also going to store our member in a class property. So we're going to say member, and that's going to be of type member. And because TypeScript is being TypeScript, it tells us that property member has no initializer and is not definitely assigned in the constructor. So we effectively need to say this is optional, or we need to initialize it. Or we can be naughty developers and turn off the warning from TypeScript, and we don't want to do that. So we don't know if we've got the member anyway, and we're going to need to check for that. Because even when we go to the member service to get the member, we don't know for sure that we're going to get one back from our API. So we're going to make this optional, and it's something we'll need to check for after we've got the member. So we're going to make an HTTP request effectively via the member service, and we know we do that inside the ng on init. So we're going to implement the on init inside the member detail component, and then we'll create the ng on init function. And below this, let's just create the method to go and load the member, rather than doing everything inside the ng on init. So the first thing we need to get is the username. So I'm going to say const username equals, and we need to say list.routes, and then we can get the route snapshot of the route. So after a user has activated a route, Angular gets out its camera and takes a photo and stores that in a snapshot. Theoretically, of course, but that's the system. So we get a snapshot of this. And from there, we can go to the param map. We've got several options, it seems, but param map seems to be the most recommended way to do this, to get a route parameter nowadays. So we'll say param map, and then we can use get, and we're looking for the username. And that matches what we have in our routes. If I go to the app routes again, that needs to match exactly what we've called it here. That's what it's going to look for. So we either have the username or it's null, so we need to check for this. And there's not much we can do if it is null, so we're going to say if not username, then we're going to just return, and just return effectively. We can't load the member. There's nothing we can do at this stage. And then we're going to say list.memberService, then get member, and we're going to pass in the username, and we're going to subscribe. And in the subscribe, we'll open curly brackets and say next, and we're going to take the member and say member goes to this.member, and then we're going to assign our class property of member the member. And then we need to call this method inside our ng on init. So I'm just going to say list.loadMember. And let's go take a look and see if this is working. And before we can go take a look, we'll need to go to our template. So I'm just going to go to list definition. And we'll just add an H1, and we'll use interpolation, and we'll say member.known as. And because the member could be null, then we get the optional chaining there, and that's fine just for testing. And also, before we can go test this, then we need to update our member card HTML as well, because we need to specify the router link inside this button. So the one with the icon FA user, that's the one we're going to use to view the details of another user. So we're going to use the router link, and also we're going to need to import that to the component, but I'll come back and do that shortly. And we're going to go to /members/ and then use interpolation, and we're going to say member. Once again, we're in a signal, so we need to use the parentheses, and then we can access the username of this user. Now we're getting the error here because I do need to import this into the component. I don't think the quick fix is going to do anything for us here, so we'll need to go to the component itself. And in the imports for this component, we'll need to say router link. And that should fix any warnings that we have inside here. So now we can go test. So let's go back to the browser, and let's pick on a user and go to that user's detailed page, and we can see Rufi. And if I go back and I pick a different user, I can see Lewis. So that means we're getting the data from our API for that user on their detailed page, which is great. So our system works. And in the next lesson, we'll take a look at adding the content for the member detailed page.